When was the last time you truly heard your own thoughts? I am not talking about the voice of a podcast host buzzing in your ear. I am not talking about the catchy music from a trending TikTok video looping in your head. And I am not talking about the anxious internal monologue that recites your to-do list. I am talking about your actual, authentic inner voice. The voice that generates original ideas. The voice that knows who you are. I asked myself this question 1 week ago, and the answer terrified me. I realized with absolute horror that I had not heard that voice in 5 years. For half a decade, the constant white noise of algorithms had drowned out everything human inside of me. I had been reduced to a biological machine, conditioned like Pavlov's dog to salivate at the sound of a notification bell. My morning routine was pathetic. Before my eyes could even focus on the ceiling, my hand was already reaching for the phone. I ate my breakfast with the phone, I walked to the subway with the phone, I even sat on the toilet with the phone. My brain had completely forgotten how to generate its own ideas. It had only learned how to consume the ideas of others. And the result of this consumption was a number that stared back at me from my settings menu: 8 hours and 47 minutes. 8 hours and 47 minutes of daily screen time. Let that sink in. That is a full-time job. That is more time than I spend sleeping. That is more time than I spend working. It is a full workday that I was voluntarily donating not to my career, not to my family, and not to my health, but to Mark Zuckerberg and the engineers in Shenzhen who design algorithms to keep me addicted. The point of no return, the moment that finally snapped me out of this trance, happened last Saturday during a meeting with my best friend. We were sitting in a coffee shop. He was opening up to me about his marriage falling apart. He was telling me about his pain, his fear, and his uncertainty about the future. It was a vulnerable, heavy moment. I was nodding. I was making a sympathetic face. I was saying uh-huh at the right times. But my eyes were not looking at him. My eyes were cast downward. My hands were under the table, resting on my knees, and my right thumb was rhythmically scrolling through my Instagram feed. In the exact moment when he stopped talking and looked up at me, waiting for a word of support or advice, I smiled. I smiled because I saw a meme of a cat falling off a table. That disconnect, his tragedy versus my cheap digital entertainment, was grotesque. He saw my smile. He looked down at my hands under the table. The look he gave me was not anger. It was something worse. It was a mix of profound disappointment and disgust. That look was a slap in the face. In that second, I realized I had turned into a digital zombie. My physical body was occupying a chair in a cafe, but my consciousness was wandering through a cloud server thousands of miles away. I had lost the basic ability to be a human being. That evening, I went home and did something that felt physically impossible. My hands were actually trembling as I pressed down on the icons for TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. The little X appeared in the corner. I tapped delete. To make sure I killed the dopamine hydra completely, I went into the accessibility settings and turned my vibrant, colorful high-definition screen into a grayscale black and white display. Suddenly, my bright, alluring portal to the world of endless entertainment turned into a dull, lifeless piece of gray glass and plastic. Almost immediately, a wave of sticky, cold fear washed over me. It was panic. What was I going to do with those 8 hours? Where would I put my hands when I stood in line? What would I think about? The silence in my apartment suddenly felt deafening. It felt hostile. It felt like a predator waiting in the corner. I went to bed that night with the sensation that I had just amputated a vital organ. But somewhere deep in the back of my mind, there was a tiny glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, that organ had actually been a cancerous tumor. The first 2 days passed in a state of strange, deceptive euphoria. It felt like the honeymoon phase of a new relationship, only I was in a relationship with my own freedom. I would wake up, instinctively grab the phone, see the empty gray screen, and feel a surge of arrogance. I control this, I told myself. I am the master of my domain. I walked down the street with my chest puffed out, looking with pity at the people around me. I saw them walking into lampposts, ignoring their children, standing like statues in the middle of the sidewalk, all glued to their glowing rectangles. Poor slaves, I thought. I have broken the chains. I truly believed I had hacked the system. I thought addiction was a myth invented by weak people and that I was a giant of willpower. I enjoyed this false lightness, completely misunderstanding the situation. I did not know that this was a trap. My brain, accustomed to a steady stream of cheap, effortless dopamine, simply had not realized that the faucet had been turned off for good. It thought this was just a temporary glitch, a short-term pause in supply. It was patiently waiting. But the real hell was waiting just around the corner, and it was preparing to strike on the morning of the third day. The third day did not greet me with sunshine or pride. It greeted me with a brutal chemical withdrawal that addiction specialists call abstinence syndrome. The euphoria of the first 48 hours evaporated instantly, leaving behind a gray, sticky anxiety and a physical sickness. My brain finally realized that the interruption in dopamine supply was not a mistake, it was a blockade. And so, my brain declared war on me. It started with something I had read about in scientific articles but never took seriously: phantom vibration syndrome. I was walking through my kitchen brewing coffee when I clearly, unmistakably felt a buzz in the right pocket of my shorts. It was the specific double buzz pattern of a direct message. I flinched. I slapped my hand against my thigh to grab the device. And I froze. There was no phone in my pocket. The pocket was empty. But the sensation of the vibration on my skin had been so real, so tactile, that a cold shiver ran down my spine. My nervous system had been so overtrained to anticipate notifications that it had started to hallucinate. It was creating ghost signals. I felt like a madman hearing voices, only my voices were digital haptic feedback signals. On that third day, my prefrontal cortex, the evolutionary masterpiece responsible for logic, planning, and self-control, lost the battle to the limbic system, the ancient lizard-like center of desires and impulses. I became an unbearable, irritable animal. I snapped at my family because a cup was left unwashed. I could not sit still for more than 5 minutes. My hands seemed to have a mind of their own. They were constantly reaching for the table, reaching for my pockets, reaching under the pillow, searching for the black rectangle that wasn't there. Every time my hand grasped empty air, I felt a spike of frustration and a fresh wave of anxiety. It was a terrifying discovery. I realized that for decades, I had been using my phone as a digital pacifier. Any moment of micro-stress, any second of boredom, any pause in conversation, I plugged my mouth with scrolling. Now, stripped of that anesthesia, I was left with exposed nerves, facing a reality that seemed unbearably bland and hostile. The fourth day was the day of the great boredom. If the third day was agony, the fourth day was torture by emptiness. I wandered around my apartment from corner to corner, literally not knowing what to do with my body. Time seemed to warp and distort. 1 hour stretched out like a week. My brain, starved of its usual diet of bright flashing images and 15-second video loops, began to panic. It was desperately searching for any source of stimulation. I opened the refrigerator 10 times in 1 hour, not because I was hungry, but because the light inside was something to look at. I found myself standing in the bathroom, reading the ingredient list on a can of air freshener. Isobutane, propane, fragrance. I read it 3 times, just to feed something, anything, into my information processing channels. It was in this ringing, suffocating void that a scary realization hit me. We, as modern human beings, have completely forgotten how to just be. We have forgotten how to look out a window and think about nothing. We have forgotten how to wait for an elevator without checking a messenger app. We have killed boredom, but in doing so, we have also killed our ability to be alone with ourselves. I sat on the sofa, staring at a blank white wall, and I felt actual physical pain because nobody was entertaining me. It wasn't a withdrawal from content, it was a withdrawal from oblivion. I was forced to sit with my own thoughts, and my thoughts were uncomfortable companions. But then, on the 5th day, something shifted. The thick, gray wall of boredom suddenly cracked, and a beam of clarity shone through. It didn't happen during a deep meditation or a philosophical breakthrough. It happened during a simple walk to the grocery store. For the first time in years, I left the house without headphones. Before this week, I had a pathological fear of silence on the street. I needed to plug my ears with a podcast, an audiobook, or music to drown out the city and my own mind. I was walking my usual route, but I felt different. I felt lighter. It was as if I had been wearing a heavy spacesuit for years, and suddenly I had taken it off. I looked up.
I saw the intricate molding on the facade of an old building I had walked past 1,000 times but never truly seen. I heard the wind rustling through the leaves of the trees. It wasn't just noise, it was a complex, layered sound, a symphony of nature that had simply not existed in my universe before. The fog in my head, that perpetual heavy cotton wool that made thinking difficult, began to dissipate. I realized that my sensory receptors, which had been violated for years by hyper-bright, hyper-loud, hyper-fast content, were finally healing. They were recovering their sensitivity. They were learning to perceive the subtle signals of the real world again. The world turned out to be not boring at all. It was incredibly detailed, high definition, and rich. I had just been looking at it through the dirty, smeared glass of a smartphone screen. The sixth day brought me a gift I thought I had lost forever, the return of focus. I sat down to work on a project that I had been procrastinating on for weeks. My excuse was always lack of inspiration, but the truth was lack of attention span. Usually, my workflow looked like this: 3 minutes of work, 5 minutes of checking messengers, 10 minutes of guilt, repeat. But this time, a miracle happened. I started working, and I fell into the task. I didn't look up for 40 minutes. 40 minutes! To a normal person from the pre-digital era, that sounds ridiculous. But for me, a person with the attention span of a goldfish, this was a superpower. I could feel the rusty gears in my head beginning to turn. They groaned at first, but then they started to spin smoothly and powerfully. And the most important thing was the ideas. My own ideas started to bubble up. These weren't recycled thoughts from a YouTuber or hot takes from Twitter. These were original, complex solutions to problems. It turns out that creativity is impossible in noise. Ideas need silence to gestate. They need boredom to grow. And I had not given them a single chance for years, pouring wet concrete into my brain every waking hour. I finished the work in 2 hours instead of the usual 6. I sat in front of my monitor, stunned by my own productivity, feeling like I had just taken off a pair of heavy ankle weights. Day 7 was my final exam. I decided to challenge the ultimate boss, a paper book. For 5 years, I had lied to myself. I told everyone, I just don't have time to read anymore. That was a lie. I had the time, I just didn't have the cognitive capacity. I took a novel from the shelf, a book that had been collecting dust for half a decade. I sat in an armchair, opened the first page, and prepared for a wrestling match with my own brain. I expected that after one page, my hand would twitch toward my pocket. I expected my thoughts to drift away. But the incredible happened. I slipped into the text. I read 1 page, then 10, then 20. I read 50 pages in one sitting, completely oblivious to the passing of time. I entered the flow state, that forgotten sweet sensation of dissolving completely into a moment where the world around you ceases to exist and only the story remains. My brain, scrubbed clean of digital noise, greedily drank up the complex sentences and narratives like a dry sponge absorbs water. That evening, I met with the same friend I had seen a week earlier, but this time everything was different. I didn't hide my eyes, I didn't check for notifications under the table, I looked him in the face. I heard the subtle intonations in his voice. I saw the micro-expressions of pain and relief. We talked for 3 hours, and in those 3 hours, not once, not a single time, did I reach for my phone. It was a real conversation between 2 living, breathing human beings, not a transactional exchange of data between 2 avatars. I felt connected, I felt present, I felt human again. On the morning of the 8th day, the experiment formally ended. I went to the App Store and re-downloaded Instagram and Telegram, but I did not return to the prison. I returned as the warden. I went into the settings and ruthlessly disabled every single notification. No red dots, no pop-up banners, no sounds. Now I decide when I enter the digital world. It does not summon me with a whistle like a trained dog. But the most important thing that stayed with me is the math, the numbers that make my blood run cold. I sat down with a calculator and did the projection. If I were to return to my previous usage of 8 hours and 47 minutes a day, and if I live for another, say, 45 years, the result is catastrophic. I would spend 15 years of pure waking life staring at a screen. 15 years. That is enough time to raise a child from birth to high school. That is enough time to learn 5 new languages to fluency. That is enough time to build a house with your own hands. That is enough time to travel to every single country on Earth. I was about to trade those 15 precious years for funny cat videos, political arguments with strangers, and the fake, curated lives of influencers who don't know I exist. I am not telling you to throw your smartphone into the river and go live in a cave. We live in the 21st century, and denying technology is foolish. It is a powerful tool. But I am begging you, stop being a slave to the tool. Do not let the hammer build the house while you watch. Do me a favor, take out your phone right now. Go to settings, look at your screen time. Look at that number. Don't look away. Let the horror of that number wash over you, and ask yourself one simple question. Are you prepared to give Mark Zuckerberg another year of your one and only life? I am offering you a deal. Try it for just 24 hours, one single day of silence, one day without social media. Go through the withdrawal, fight through the boredom, face the fear of missing out, survive the phantom vibrations, and I promise you, on the other side of that silence, you will find someone you lost a long time ago. You will find yourself.